Yo, what is up? My name is JT Cannon. Thank you for coming to the channel. Welcome to the Cannon family. If you're new, click subscribe and you're automatically in the Cannon family. And if you're already here, what's up, fam? Haven't seen you in a while. Now, today we're talking about something that everybody seems to want to talk about, but nobody seems to have the answers to. We're talking about, where does God come from? Now, I got this idea of going on my Instagram and I started doing like little tiny 10-slide guides on really important biblical questions and questions that like people have the answers to, such as, where did God come from? How do you know the Bible is real? All kinds of stuff like that. So if you like that stuff, go to my Instagram, it's in the description. But today we're talking and doing a longer version of my first one I did, which is, where does God come from? And in this video, you're going to hear a lot of different arguments about God, but there's one that is honestly, in my opinion, like the best. I've never seen anybody who's not a Christian debate that this isn't real, and we're going to start off with that one. The first argument that we're going to be going into on where did God come from is from Kevin Hovind. I love Kevin Hovind. He's such an inspirational person. I still watch some of his apologetics sermons today, but I call this the Hovind argument. Here's what Hovind says.
All right, your question, where did God come from, assumes that you're thinking of the wrong, obviously it displays that you're thinking of the wrong God, because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter. If he's affected by time, space, or matter, he's not God. Time, space, and matter is what we call a continuum. All of them have to come into existence at the same instant, because if there were matter but no space, where would you put it? If there were matter and space but no time, when would you put it? You cannot have time, space, or matter independently. They have to come into existence simultaneously. The Bible answers that in 10 words. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth, there's matter. So you have time, space, matter, created a trinity of trinities there. Just, time is past, present, future. Space has length, width, height. Matter has solid, liquid, gas. You have a trinity of trinities created instantaneously. And the God who created them has to be outside of them. If he's limited by time, he's not God. The guy who created this computer is not in the computer. He's not running around in there changing the numbers on the screen, okay? The God who created this universe is outside of the universe. He's above it, beyond it, in it, through it. He's unaffected by it.
In my opinion, this is the most convincing argument, because I've never seen anybody, one, do such a thorough argument, and two, actually, I've never seen anybody debate this successfully. Like, the dude who debated this in the video that I saw of it, I feel so bad for him, because he just got, completely murked, and, you see, his face be like, ugh. Now, some of the other arguments, they're convincing, but I don't think they should be, a main argument for where did God come from. The first one is a creator without a creator, right? So, obviously, if you see creation out here, you see, a house, you see everything. Someone obviously had to create it. A good example is a computer. Yes, a computer is a piece of creation, but someone had to create the computer. And the person who created the computer lies outside of the computer. He's not inside the computer. So it also gives way to the fact that God isn't involved in each and our individual life. Now, the problem with this is that someone created a computer, right? But they don't have to be God, right? A God didn't have to create everything. That's what someone who is not part of this says. They say someone who's not a God can obviously create this. The third argument that you have is a design without a designer. It's the idea that there's a universal design to everything, and how everything is worded in such precisely that there has to be a creator. For example, if the earth was 0.01 degrees off, no one could inhabit it. There are tons of other aspects of the argument, from laws, natural laws such as gravity, to universal laws of thermodynamics, right? Universal laws being that they're laws that scientists say govern our universe, and without those laws, they wouldn't happen. This argument implies that whoever created the world, the universe, whatever you want to call it, also created those universal laws with it. But I don't like this argument in particular, because yes, everything has a design, but it doesn't really prove that, from a Christian perspective, that the God of the Bible exists. It proves that maybe, at best, a God exists, but it doesn't prove that the God of the Bible exists. And now, as a Christian, I want to prove that God of the Bible, right? The Trinity, I want to prove that they all existed. I don't want to prove that a God exists, because then any God could exist, Allah could exist, Buddha could exist. Now, the next one I find particularly convincing, I'd probably put it second tier on this, is the morality argument. It's how we're all born with a natural sense of right and wrong. So obviously those ideas had to come somewhere. And it also gives way to the idea that this knowledge that we possess in our heads had to come from somewhere. It didn't just come naturally. For example, if you stop and think and you go to murder someone, a voice in your head says, no, stop. A Christian would say that's the Holy Spirit. guiding you and telling you what's right from wrong, being like your moral compass. Because remember, God's not on the earth, Jesus isn't either. God now put the Holy Spirit inside of us so it can guide us on our paths that God has for us. In a sense, think about the Trinity this way. God is the mind, Jesus is the heart, and the Spirit is like that little voice inside of our head that's like, stop, you can do this. Kind of like the little devil and the devil and the like little angel on your shoulder when you're a kid. That's kind of how I picture it sometimes. So we are all born with this like incense right and wrong. We're all born with this instant knowing of like, okay, I obviously shouldn't kill another human, or I obviously shouldn't rape someone. Now society afterwards, this is where the argument starts to go off. They say, well, if you are born with the natural right or wrong, then why do some people fall off and do things that we know and are not morally right? And that's where this argument really starts to fall down. But I think a good way to save the argument is to say we're born with free will. God did not inherently cause that. God gave us the right and wrong. It's up to us to choose the right or the wrong. The argument of morality, the idea that we're born with right or wrong, would be much more convincing if you could also prove that God did not create suffering. If you can prove that God did not create suffering, then the idea of right and wrong, you almost can't debate it. If God is not responsible for suffering, he's just responsible for putting the idea in the first place, then the results afterwards are not our fault. For example, you may drop your friend off at a Walmart or a mall or something, but what he does after that is not your fault. You just dropped him off at the mall. In the same way that God created us, he created us with right or wrong, and what we do with that information and that inherent spirit, and if we listen to it or not, that is not God's fault. Those are the four main arguments that I've really heard, and all of them each have their own convincing, but like I said, Ken Hovind's argument about where did God come from is by far my favorite argument that I've ever heard about the gospel, or even, I guess, any Christian apologetic in general. I would say that's probably my favorite argument. However, I plan on doing a lot more of these and analyzing different arguments, because it not only does it help you grow, but it also helps me grow. And I'm all about growing into this channel, and I really want to help the Canon family, everybody here, grow. So if you have any ideas on any like topics you want to come from, I'm thinking about doing did God create suffering and the different arguments for it next. But if you have any other discussions or any other questions that you want, I would love for you to comment below and just tell me what you want me to cover. Because after all, I'm here to educate you guys, and I'm here to also educate myself. So I'm sure you have good questions. Before you leave though, make sure to subscribe to the Canon channel. If you don't subscribe, what are you doing? We have a nice little community here, and God says to be in community, so just be in this one. Anyways, it's JT, signing out. Peace.